As long as there's been personal computing, it always came with a huge promise. The promise to change the way that we interact with the world through the computers, through this new technology, and with that shaping and changing the way that we eventually live. Steve Jobs framed it as a bicycle for our mind, ramping up efficiency. Bill Gates said that we would eventually get information at our fingertips. And boy, did we get information. We probably got an overload that we never anticipated, like 70 years worth of video data at each individual day, billions of images and short messages containing videos each individual day. And don't forget the cats on the internet. I somewhere read that there's like 15% of all internet traffic dedicated to cats. But this is nothing to what just has happened this summer, when AI generated videos took the internet by storm. This happened. Unfortunately, there's no audio. I don't know whether we're going to get this. But you see all of this here being generated just by a prompt. You see how easy it now is to generate video content.
It's a breakthrough moment from chapter 7. When everything falls apart, we rebuild ourselves stronger.
Everything is fake, including me. I'm a construct created by the Door brothers. Anyway, here's Tom with the weather.
At least you heard the most important thing. Everything is fake. So, not me, I'm here in physical reality. And if that weren't enough, now you have influencers not just creating this arbitrary content, but even teaching others how to do more within just 1 minute. And there's a lot of studies indicating that this may, to a certain extent, this gaming of the AI algorithms that so far were giving us the content would now break these algorithms, and with that social media to a certain extent. Now, to understand where things are going, let me very briefly take you into the mechanics of this economy, this attention economy out there. And with that, start with Daniel Kahneman, who also here at DLD years ago gave a talk, this great late Nobel laureate. He pointed out that our brains are 95% of the time on autopilot. He called this System 1 thinking. Very effective in the sense that it's very efficient for us to do so, but very error-prone, and only a tiny amount of the time you're really using your powerful rational System 2. Now, with that comes that our attention, which is becoming the steering wheel for our minds, determining where we're looking, where we're eventually going, is easy to game. And it's easy to hack, and that is something that has been used. First, just monitoring where we're paying attention in the early 2000s, then in the 2010s, hacking and altering the attention, and with that the group of entire groups. And now very recently, we have automatic content generation, as you've seen, where you can target the individuals. With that comes that the entire ad market has very recently topped at more than $1 trillion a year. And out of this big cake here, we see a transition where the revenue is going. Not so much anymore to the content creators, but now the largest chunk is actually going to the distributors. Digital distributors like these 3 big tech companies here taking 3/4 of the ad revenue outside of China, for instance. And this is not all. We're now seeing a transition to what I would call the attention economy 3.0. We're not just automizing the way that content is generated. No. If you own one of these big foundation models there, you have something much more. You have a live laboratory. If some company has a product which they want to figure out whether this would sell with customers or how to adjust it, now you don't need to directly go to the customers anymore. You can ask their agentic AI, their foundation models, who probably know them better than they know them themselves, and then adjust your product. And then comes the second stage. This was only the first. In the second stage, you can then utilize these agents and everything that they know about their users to then target ad campaigns, and now individually, not anymore to groups like we've seen beforehand. Anybody can get live content in a very specific user-targeted manner. I mean, I just created this here with this prompt that you see up there. That took me a few seconds in this particular case. Now, one thing is clear. There are two paths. This was one which eventually may lead to us drowning in information and starve for the knowledge that we're really looking for. But there's a different direction where generative AI can take us. Here's an example of an image, a very early one, before we created Stable Diffusion. And what you see here is that we've fed the system just with a bunch of images, but it learned that there's reflections, that there's shading happening. So in short, it took a lot of information, lots of images, and started to link these information, and out of that gather new knowledge, things that we've never told the system about physical constraints there. And I see there a transition to the generative AI potentially helping us to personalize and democratize the access to knowledge, in this particular case, from live, online, incoming, unstructured information. And with that, we have a second path, a new opportunity. Rather than depending on fixed filtering and the selection to help us not drown in this flood of information, we now have the ability to get empowered and control what's guiding our own attention. If we can control and trust this AI there, we can utilize generative AI to personalize the filters that we're utilizing to deal with the world, to summarize details, explain content, and so on. However, this does not come automatically, right? We need to want it, and secondly, we need to be, to a certain extent at least, in control and know and trust these AI algorithms, because if that's not the case, then you can see that this pendulum swings the other way. And with that, I see a transition into a new type of society. John Naisbitt back then pointed out that we're moving towards an information society. I guess now is the time with new technology to move from the information to a knowledge society. A society where our system to intelligence, the rational part, which took us a lot of effort so far, and therefore we didn't engage it that often, only 5% time, as Kahneman said, where we can now boost this and scale it up so that it becomes really effective. A society where finally intelligence, or for that matter, artificial types of intelligence, become really a commodity. Commodity meaning that they become accessible, that they become scalable, for everybody accessible, deep and having breadth at the same time, and very fast access to them. Make no mistake, what I'm showing here is like, yeah, this is just a bit more intelligence. No, this is even more than the transition that we used to have from the telephone booth to the mobile phone, right? This is was also not just like getting rid of the cord. We know how much more valuable and how much more versatile phones became once they moved out of these booths that we're having there. But it's also clear that in order to give this new technology value, it's not sufficient to just replace bits and pieces by an AI and just hope for the best. We need to think at the business that we're doing through the eyes of the new technology to understand how we can really utilize it to create value. I see a transition there where what you're having there is not creating just funny videos of cats. Look underneath. What you're actually having there is a world simulator, world models, even if you move from BU3 to Genie, for instance. A system which you can utilize to simulate how the world would behave in a lot of engineering applications. In robotics, today we are going to hear more about the great developments in the Munich robotics ecosystem. In health, mind that last year we had a Nobel Prize on protein folding, going in a direction where AI can help us to actually discover new medicine and solve problems, as we discussed this morning on stage in the big field of health. And AI, generative AI, is also taking classical problems like weather prediction, for instance, and starting to dominate there more and more. So it's the engineering, it's the customer products, but in particular also, as this OECD study showed, the research field, which is going to benefit tremendously by becoming a multiplier for a lot of different areas if it is actually utilizing generative AI. And that means that the generative AI becomes ever more important, ever more powerful, because we start to depend more and more on these foundation models that we're having there. It's clear that we need, for one, more international collaboration in that field, but at the second time, there's also legal issues that we're having, questions to what extent, for instance, the US Cloud Act is trumping, in that case, rights that we would have in the European Union, as this discussion here in France showed. We had very recently the case where the 4.0 model by OpenAI got shut down, and people noticed that they're not just having data in a cloud, which they may not have access to. No, they created artificial personas, and now the question is, how can I still access them if they're shut down by somebody else? So we have here a classical case of us needing a certain amount of sovereignty in this field, where at the same time we also want to have international collaboration. And that's why the Bavarian state and state ministry have pushed for sovereignty in the field of AI within or by means of several initiatives. First, the high-tech agenda, which also got me and many of my colleagues here. We heard of Blue Swan beforehand, which we're trying to establish in the future. And right now, it's the Bavarian AI Foundational Model Initiative that we are starting, and where we have already acquired GPU computing resources, where we are adding engineering personnel into the Free State and additional researchers to strengthen the Bavarian AI ecosystem with resources, with critical, so far lacking expertise in the field of engineering, data, networking people together, and all of that by working towards a common goal, working also, in that case, on multimodal foundation models. Now, I laid out for you two paths towards the future. And the important fact here is that both of these routes exist concurrently. It's not an either-or. As Charles Dickens said, the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness are there at the same time. The age of AI slop just going up and the knowledge society are there at the same time. The age of arbitrariness of content and the age of valuable applications coexist. And make no mistake, the negatives come automatically, but we need to work hard and need to have dedication to actually get the valuable positives out there. So it's your choice. Let's make this wisely. Thanks.